So today's topic is having a healthy relationship with food during the holidays. And the reason why I chose this topic, especially for our nutrition and wellness for myeloma chapter, is because I feel like there is a lot of pressure during the holidays, especially for cancer patients and caregivers, to stay away from foods that they might enjoy, or even to be extra vigilant about what they're eating, because they're concerned that sugar feeds cancer, or they don't want to become any bigger than they are, or just those typical cultural pressures that we feel seem to be amplified by the stress of myeloma. And I don't want this for you. I want these holidays to be things that you can enjoy. We're already worried about infection prevention. We're already worried about so many things. Let's not let our relationship with food be something that we allow to pressure us or something that we worry about during this joyous holiday season. So here to talk to us about this is Kathryn Kanter and Mara Pineau. And Kathryn is an oncology dietitian at UT Southwestern. She received her bachelor's and master's degree from St. Louis University, where she also completed her dietetic internship. She began working at UT Southwestern Clements University Hospital in 2015, where she specialized in oncology and critical care nutrition. In 2020, Kathryn transferred to Simmons Cancer Center and now primarily works with patients with hematologic malignancies, you guys know I know that word, such as multiple myeloma, leukemia, and lymphoma. Kathryn enjoys cooking, trying new restaurants, and spending time with her cat, Callie, in her spare time. Mara Pineau is an oncology dietitian at UT Southwestern and Moncrief Cancer Center in Fort Worth. Mara received her undergraduate degree from Michigan State University and then went on to receive her master's degree in nutrition from Marshall University. Mara has recently opened up a weight loss clinic where she strives to improve her clients' relationship with food while helping them achieve their health goals. In her free time, Mara enjoys reading, hiking, rock climbing, and riding her horse. I'm really excited for you guys again to hear this presentation. I saw their slides. I'm giddy about them. So with that being said, I'll turn the time over to you guys, Mara and Kathryn. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for having us. My name is Mara Pineau, and I'm here with Kathryn Kanter. We are both registered dietitians at UT Southwestern Simmons Cancer Center with certifications in oncology. Today, we will discuss how to create a better relationship with food through intuitive eating, how to navigate holidays, and how to create a healthy New Year's resolution that lasts. Okay. So before we dive into how to eat intuitively, let's first discuss the difference between traditional restrictive diets and intuitive eating. Dieting is restricting certain foods or types of foods that are deemed as bad while allowing other foods that are deemed as good. For example, you might think of the keto diet, low calorie diet, low carb diet, intermittent fasting, anything that you commonly think of as a diet. Dieting often leads to low self-esteem from multiple failed attempts, eating disorders, a preoccupation with food and body weight, distraction from other health goals, and ultimately weight gain. Intuitive eating, on the other side, is a body and mind integration of instinct, emotion, and rational thoughts. To put it simply, intuitive eating is listening to your body and attuning to your body's physical and emotional needs rather than abiding by a prescribed diet. By eating intuitively, you will likely have increased well-being, decreased risk of eating disorders, and improved biomarkers like blood sugar and improved cholesterol with no diet at all. Now, I just want you to think for a moment, if dieting programs had to stand up to the same scrutiny as medications, they would never be allowed for public consumption. Imagine taking cholesterol medication that improved your blood results for a few weeks, but long-term clogged your arteries. Would you really embark on a diet if you knew that the diet would cause worsening health and increased body weight over time? Most of you, I would think, would say no. So I just want to kind of keep that in mind as we discuss the difference between intuitive dieting or intuitive eating, I'm sorry, and dieting. So let's dive into the principles that make up intuitive eating. Today, we will focus on rejecting the diet mentality, honoring your hunger, making peace with food, challenging the food police, feeling your fullness, discovering satisfaction, coping with your emotions, respecting your body, and honoring your health. By going through the intuitive eating process as seen here, you will ultimately eat less, enjoy more, and cultivate a better relationship with food. So let's first start with rejecting the diet mentality. First, we must reject what we've been told by the TV, tabloids, internet, and celebrities about the fantasy of dieting and weight loss. With these 4 steps, we can start putting dieting and the thoughts that provoke dieting behind us for good. Step 1 is to recognize the damage that dieting causes. It is not widely known, but chronic dieting and restrictive eating can cause increase in weight gain, slowed down metabolism, decreased lean body muscle mass, increased food binges and cravings, increased hunger and preoccupation with food, decreased satiety cues or fullness cues, increased fat in the abdominal region, and increased risk of osteoporosis, gallstones, high blood pressure, chronic inflammation, and some forms of cancer, actually. So it doesn't sound too glamorous, does it? Number 2 is being aware of the diet mentality, traits, and thinking patterns. I often have clients that say that need more willpower or motivation, and finally they will be able to accomplish their health goals and follow whatever blank diet that they're trying to follow. But actually, the most common problem that I do hear is that people just need more willpower or motivation. So what is willpower motivation? It's an attempt to counter natural desires and replace them with rules. So unfortunately, it is very widely known by behavioral scientists that motivation and willpower fade over time. For example, have you ever been so motivated to lose weight one day and find yourself cheating the next day when the hunger or cravings start setting in? That's because motivation and willpower are not keys to losing weight at all. So when motivation fails, we often begin to feel failure and subsequently low self-esteem and think to ourselves, why am I so weak? However, with intuitive eating, there's no such thing as failure. Both intuitive eating and healthy eating is a learning process, not a struggle with willpower or motivation. With intuitive eating, you will never have to worry about motivation because you don't really need it at all. Additionally, a diet with rigid rules, which most diets have, triggers rebellion. For example, have you ever been told what to do and then done the exact opposite because you just wanted to defy the rules? That's kind of what dieting leads to as well. Step 3 is getting rid of dieting tools like scales, meal plans, diets, low-calorie recipes, and other dieting tools. Scales especially should be thrown out. Scales can devalue hard work and months of progress. Weighing yourself can increase eating or binging and often halts progress by making you second guess all your progress and efforts. For example, the scale does not reflect body composition, only weight. So if you starve yourself on a low-calorie diet, you may love what you see on the scale, but what the scale is showing is not a decrease, is actually a decrease in lean body muscle mass and subsequent water weight loss, as muscles contain about 70% water. So in an effort to have more energy, the body will actually eat away the muscle, leaving you weak and less healthy than when you started. So a lower weight is not actually always more valuable, and scales do not reflect the healthy eating and intuitive eating efforts that you are putting in. Step 4 is to be compassionate towards yourself and towards your body. Something else behavioralists know is that progress is often not made by feeling bad, it's actually made by feeling good. So be compassionate towards yourself. The key to health is progress, not perfection. You are not going to make or break your health from one meal or food. It's about consistency. For example, you likely just ate more than you intended to on Thanksgiving. I think everyone did, but you won't gain weight from that one meal. Rather, the body averages out many meals and days to help the body stay at status quo. So allow yourself to enjoy the holidays and be compassionate toward yourself and your body in the process. So here is a picture showing how diets don't work. We often start with body image issues. So we look in the mirror, maybe we think we're fat, or we're comparing ourselves to someone we see on TV, our favorite actor or favorite show, which triggers our motivation to start restricting our food intake. Well, that might work for a couple hours or maybe a couple weeks, but eventually we start fighting food cravings and hunger, which then lead to a loss of control and overeating, which we always said we wouldn't do, right? But that leads to then weight gain, and then the cycle starts over again. So when we're looking at restrictive dieting this way, it's easy to see that restrictive dieting does not work. So next we'll talk about honoring our hunger. So many dieters often fight hunger and view hunger as an enemy to weight loss. However, hunger is a powerful driving mechanism for the body and tends to unravel diets at one time or another. So conversely, in the intuitive eating world, we know that by keeping our body biologically fed with adequate energy and carbohydrates, we often eat less and enjoy our food more. Otherwise, if you fight hunger, you can trigger a primal drive to overeat, which is the starvation response that your body employs to stay alive. Primal hunger can cause obsession with food and subsequent binge eating, loss of willpower to eat healthy, mood changes like depression, irritability, and moodiness. For example, if I handed you a plate of cookies when you were starving, would you eat one cookie or the entire plate? Now think about if you were moderately hungry. What would you eat? The entire plate or just a couple cookies? Your answer is likely that you'll eat the entire plate when starving, or maybe 1 to 2 cookies when you're moderately hungry. Therefore, we know making sure your body is fed will help reduce overeating and save you calories in the long run. So next, we will move on to making peace with food. Just like with hunger, when we diet, we often see food as the enemy. But when eating intuitively, we see food as beneficial and vital to our health. Like I was saying earlier, we make long-term changes from feeling good, not bad. Therefore, we must change our mindset from thinking negatively about food to thinking positively about what food can do for us. When restricting a certain food, you often start thinking about the food more and more. For example, people that go on the keto diet may not even like carbs too much, but when they go on the diet, they can't stop thinking about carbs. They tend to lose control and end up binging on those carbs, as if they will never eat carbs again. By restricting foods, it creates an overvalued level of specialness that leads to the Last Supper type binge, where once carbs weren't a big deal, they are now a huge deal, all because we chose to restrict them. Conversely, when eating intuitively, you give yourself unconditional permission to eat and therefore eliminate the specialness of certain foods and decrease the urgency to overeat. When you finally allow yourself to eat your forbidden foods, let's say it's bread will become habitual and boring. What you once saw as alluring is now just an option on the menu. For example, have you ever wanted something so bad? Let's say you're a child and you wanted a toy so bad, you asked for it for Christmas, but then when you got it, you got so bored and you didn't even play with it for very long. That's kind of what making peace with forbidden food is. It's allowing yourself to eat it and realizing that it's not as good as maybe you thought. So to help you in the quest to making peace with food, make sure you have time to taste and savor your foods, reduce the distraction between meals and slow down. Create habituation with guilty pleasures. Habituation means the more someone's exposed to the food, the less appealing it becomes. For example, if your guilty pleasure is chocolate, allowing yourself to make peace with chocolate and habitualize it by eating it with every meal, every day, what would you learn about your interest in chocolate? Maybe you would learn that chocolate is not so interesting anymore, and now that it's become normal and mundane. Next, strip yourself from food rules and guilt. Trust that you know what your body wants and needs to eat for fuel, and always eat in relation to your hunger and satiety levels. So in case after case, when people are given free choice and access to all varieties of food, after going through the peace process, they end up balancing their intake to include mostly nutritious foods with some enjoyment foods mixed in. So here is a step-by-step process about how to make peace with the foods that are off limits to you. So number one is just paying attention to the foods that are appealing to you and making a list. Circle the foods that you've been restricting and go out and buy or order those foods. Now I want you to think about, do those foods even taste good? Was it really just the thought of them that was good, or do they actually taste good? Now, if they taste good, feel free to eat them. However, I want you to gauge your body to see how it feels. Do you feel better after you eat it? Is your stomach upset? Are you fatigued? You're tired? Things like that, because that really makes a big difference on whether you want to eat that food again. For example, I know if I eat candy, yes, it tastes good, but I know my stomach's going to hurt afterwards. So I don't even touch candy. But that's just something that I have realized over the years of allowing myself to eat something. You allow yourself to realize what it actually tastes like and if you actually need it in your diet. So the next is going to be challenging the food police. So I'm sure everyone has experienced, at some point, of someone making comments about the food choices that you're making, or maybe it's you judging yourself. The food police is often in your head, or maybe it's your spouse or friend or family that looks at you and the way you're eating and says, maybe you shouldn't be eating that. That type of labeling food as either good or bad is detrimental to intuitive eating. When the voice in your head or the person makes a comment about your food choices, I want you to think to yourself and ask yourself, has that food actually ever harmed you? Are you enjoying it? Is it nourishing you? Remember, there are no such thing as bad or good foods, and that all foods fit in moderation. Next, we'll move on to feeling your fullness. So feeling your fullness means understanding and finding comfortable satiety. The key here is listening to your body and understanding what comfortable satiety is. When we constantly eat, the feeling of being full or even very full, we are constantly stretching our stomachs. When we constantly stretch our stomachs, we are able to eat more and more food over time while still stopping at that fullness feeling, and therefore gaining weight and allowing us to eat even more food. Think about how portion size has slowly increased over time, and it isn't a surprise to learn that many people don't know how to stop at that satisfied feeling. And rather, we typically eat with a diet mentality of eating like the Last Supper until we're uncomfortably full or stuffed. One big factor that I often run into with my clients is that people are a part of the clean plate club. I know I was as a kid, and it's not a big surprise that many other people are as well. Many of us eat whatever's on our plates, regardless of our satiety level, as that is what we've been taught. However, by eating this way, we lose track of our satiety and end up eating until we're stuffed and stretched our stomachs. The biggest learning curve is stopping before we have stretched our stomachs and have reached the 8 on the hunger scale, which is full. We must learn to hone into our body's signals and to honor our body by stopping the scale at around 5 to 7, which is neutral to satisfied. By doing so, we will feel better, more energetic, and save ourselves the stretched out stomachs and unnecessary calories. So how do we know what it feels like to be satisfied? Comfortable satiety is the absence of hunger rather than the feeling of fullness. Learn to start honing in how your body is feeling throughout your meal to better gauge where you stand on that hunger scale. The key is conscious eating without distraction and eating slowly. Eating with distractions like TV, eating at work, or while you're on your phone, reduces your ability to know when to stop and tends to lead to overeating. The same thing goes for eating fast or rushed eating. If you eat too fast, you don't give your stomach time to tell your brain what it's feeling, often leaving you with uncomfortable fullness. Next, we'll talk about the satisfaction factor. So this principle of intuitive eating is usually everyone's favorite because it focuses on what we like to eat. The premise is when you eat what you really want in an inviting environment, the pleasure you derive from is pleasure you derive from the food is a powerful force and helping you feel satisfied and content, and thereby reducing cravings later on and helping you to eat less during that meal. To help you discover the satisfaction factor, first you need to explore and find the foods that you really like. So a lot of times when we're dieting, we completely forget what kinds of foods we like or what we enjoy eating because we're eating based on rules. So finding foods that you like is the first option or the first step. I often tell my clients to make a list of foods and textures that they like. So you might want to find foods that are gooey, crunchy, spicy, and just kind of start exploring those different tastes. Next, I want you to sit down when you eat. Don't eat while standing up or while working, and try to eat without distractions. Take a moment to focus on the meal instead of racing through it, and take a moment to savor each bite that you eat, because that will help you eat less overall. And finally, checking on your fullness level. What number on the scale are you? Next, we will learn to cope with our emotions without using food. So people eat for many reasons. We often eat because we're bored, for excitement, maybe for comfort, maybe we're sick and we're having chicken noodle soup. Maybe it's distraction and we're eating a bag of popcorn in front of the TV to distract from homework or chores. Maybe we're eating to feel sleepy and we want to sedate ourselves. Maybe it's a reward, maybe going out to eat after getting a promotion at work. It could be for love, having a dessert after a good date. Stress, anxiety, using food to relax when you're too busy or don't have time for yourself. Depression, we know that food can trigger a release of dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter in our brain. So it is not a wonder why people turn to food when they're feeling sad or depressed. So what I always do is I ask my clients to evaluate, where are you on the hunger and satiety scale every time you eat? If you are not hungry, you are likely eating for another reason. So now evaluate what that reason might be. Are you bored? Are you upset? Do you need comfort? And then make a plan as how to deal with that emotion without food. So for example, you might want to take care of your basic needs. Maybe you're tired and you need to get rest. Maybe you need to express your feelings and reach out to your loved one. Maybe you need to take a bath. Maybe you need to journal your feelings or just let yourself cry. Or maybe you just need a distraction. Maybe you're just bored and you need to distract yourself from eating. And so that might mean going to the movies, renting a movie, reading a book, taking a walk, doing a puzzle, something like that. I often ask my clients to create a list of distractions and ways to deal with their emotions, so they can look back at that whenever they're feeling bored or they're feeling like they're trying to eat or want to eat, but are not hungry. I always tend to ask them to look at that list and see what they can do rather than treating that emotion with food. So next we'll go to respecting our bodies. So respecting your body can be hard, but it begins with accepting your current body for what it is, caring for your body and health in positive ways, like intuitive eating, and resisting unrealistic standards perpetuated by the media. So respecting your body might sound like, I accept my body's genetic blueprint, I have gratitude for my body, I practice respectful behaviors towards my body, I do not compare my body to others, I alter the language I use when speaking to my body, and I am attentive to my body's needs. Respecting your body is a process, but it's an integral part of truly freeing yourself from restrictive dieting and ultimately leading to intuitive eating. So the last one we'll talk about is honoring your health. Michael Pollan sums up honoring your health through nutrition well by saying, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. However, let's dive into healthy eating in a little deeper. First, we'll talk a lot about balance. So the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition reported from a study that people who omitted several food groups had a higher chance of dying. So eating more food groups and a more variety of food, but also eating in balance and moderation is definitely a healthy thing to do within your diet. So like I said before, you will not get a nutrition deficiency if you do not eat enough in one day. Similarly, you will not make or break your health from one meal or even one day of eating. It's about consistency, balance, and moderation. The next is portion size. If you're attuned to your hunger, fullness, and satisfaction, there's no need to worry about portion sizes because your body will tell you itself. Fruits and vegetables, we all know how important fruits and vegetables are. People who eat more fruits and vegetables have been shown through studies to have a lower risk of chronic disease, especially cancer. And because fruits and vegetables are loaded with antioxidants, fiber, and are not calorie dense. So therefore, eating more is usually not a bad idea. Now, we also want to focus on eating whole foods and less processed foods. More chicken, lean meat, turkey, fish, unsaturated fats, whole grains, fiber, dairy, and then ultimately more water rather than sugar sweetened beverages. However, ultimately, I like to tell people to focus on what to add in your diet rather than what to take away. And next, I will let Kathryn finish up the presentation with this plate and then how to eat during the holidays and for the New Year's.
All right. So just to kind of finish up what Mara was talking about here, we always recommend what is called the plate method as a good way to sort of start to incorporate that intuitive eating and also making sure that you are fitting in all of the food groups. So I really like the plate method because it does not involve, measuring cups or using a scale to weigh out food or anything like that. Sometimes when we are, measuring out food like that, it can really make us start to kind of hyperfixate on foods, which we do want to try to avoid with intuitive eating. So you can see here half of the plate, and this is a 9-inch plate, by the way. Half of the plate is going to be non-starchy vegetables. Fruit can also be included in this as well. The key here, like Mara said before, is variety. We know that different colors of fruits and vegetables are going to have very different nutrient profiles. So for example, an orange carrot is going to have a completely different nutrient profile than green broccoli. So aiming for variety in the colorations and the types of fruits and vegetables in the diet is always a good idea. You can see here also 1/4 of the plate should be a grain food or a starchy food. So that can be a potato, a sweet potato. It can be rice, it can be bread, whatever starchy vegetable you enjoy. Again, just like Mara said, try to incorporate some whole grains in there whenever possible. We know that there are so many health benefits to having a high fiber diet, including decreased cholesterol levels, better blood sugar control, and also it really helps us with that fullness feeling at the end of a meal. And then we also, of course, have our lean proteins, which is about 1/4 of the plate as well. The American Institute for Cancer Research recommends red meat 2 to 3 times a week, or 12 to 18 ounces per week. And then otherwise trying to focus on more of those lean proteins such as chicken, turkey, fish twice a week for those healthy omega-3 fatty acids, and even some vegetarian sources of protein as well, things like beans, lentils, tofu, edamame, things like that. So we'll move on to the next slide. So kind of getting a little bit more into the holiday specific information here. I wanted to share this Intuitive Eaters Holiday Bill of Rights with you because a lot of times, the holidays can sort of evoke some feelings of guilt or anxiety surrounding food, just because it can kind of throw us, off from our normal day-to-day lives. And so this Intuitive Eaters Holiday Bill of Rights was written by the original intuitive eating dietitian. I'll read them to you now, but I definitely recommend consider maybe brainstorming and even writing your own holiday Bill of Rights, just to help kind of release any of those lingering feelings of guilt about how you're eating during the holiday season so that you can really truly enjoy yourself and enjoy the holidays with your family and your friends. So first one here, you have the right to savor your meal without cajoling or judgment and without discussion of calories eaten or the amount of exercise needed to burn off said calories. A lot of times you might hear at the dinner table, oh, if I eat this piece of pie, I'm going to go have to walk 3 miles to, burn it off. And, it might get some laughs or, everyone might, kind of nod their head in agreement. But again, this can kind of create that unhealthy relationship with food that we are trying to avoid because you do not have to earn your food. Food is a basic human right and a need, and we should not feel that we need to justify what we are eating. You have the right to enjoy second servings without apology. No need to give an excuse as to why you're going to, get up and get a second helping of something. You have every right to be able to enjoy as much food as your stomach says that it needs. You have the right to honor your fullness, even if that means saying no thank you to dessert or a second helping of food. It is not your responsibility to make someone happy by overeating, even if it took hours to prepare a special holiday dish. You have the right to say no thank you without explanation when offered more food. You have the right to stick to your original answer of no, even if you are asked multiple times. Just calmly and politely repeat, no thank you, really. And of course, you have the right to eat pumpkin pie for breakfast. So again, this is just an example, and I encourage you to maybe spend some time thinking about maybe what yours would look like in your own personal lives. Move on to the next slide. So potential traps for the holidays. So sometimes the holidays can seem like a catch-22 if you're not prepared for some potential stress-inducing situations. And this can really in turn lead to feelings of dread and anxiety surrounding the holidays, which of course we want to try to avoid. It should be a happy time spent with family and friends and enjoying yourself. So it can really help to try to prepare for some of these potential situations that you might find yourself in. So this is just an example list of some of those difficult situations or issues that might come up during the holiday season. So maybe spend some time thinking about how you might handle them, and you can be better prepared and then thus decrease those feelings of stress and anxiety. So number 1, fear of being judged for your eating and or your body. Number 2, anxiety about family dysfunction. Number 3, potential feelings of loneliness during the holiday season. Number 4, worry about overeating or eating emotionally. Number 5, anxiety about what to wear or how you'll look. Number 6, concerns about fitting holiday events into your busy work schedule. And number 7, boredom and discomfort at parties. Again, this is just an example list. I highly encourage you to spend a little bit of time brainstorming maybe what those situations might look like in your own personal life that you might benefit from starting to think, through the possible solutions to some of these things that might come up during this season. Move on to the next slide. So navigating holiday events. It can be tough for a lot of people, going into a social situation, not knowing what food is going to be offered, not knowing how they're going to feel going into, a holiday event. So this is just some suggestions for kind of helping to incorporate that intuitive eating concept this holiday season. So first, do not skip meals or restrict your portions before your holiday events. Sometimes people might say, oh, I'm going to skip lunch today because I have a big, work dinner coming up and I want to be able to eat as much as, I can without, feeling bad about it. But in reality, this can kind of lead to that binge eating, later, that binge eating behavior, which we want to try to avoid. So try to make sure that you are staying on your daily routine as much as possible throughout the holiday season without skipping meals or eating differently than you might normally. Scope out the buffet before you reach for a plate. In doing this, you can kind of see everything that's available to you, so you can make a plan to make sure that you have room for everything on your plate. Eat slowly and enjoy the food. Like Mara said before, one really important aspect of intuitive eating is, making sure that you're paying attention to how food is making you feel. And it does take about 20 minutes to process when the stomach is full. So give yourself enough time to be able to eat slowly and enjoy that food without distraction as much as possible. And if you still feel hungry after 20 minutes, go back for seconds. Like we said before, you should not feel guilty about going back for seconds if your stomach is still telling you that it's hungry after that 20-minute or so mark. Ditch the all or nothing mentality. Like Mara said, a few meals of overindulgence is not going to throw off or override everything else that you have been doing to try to improve your health. So you should be able to enjoy those holiday foods without reservation. And then lastly, say no to the January diet commitments. We hear often, oh, I'm going to, eat as much as I want during the holidays, and then diet starts January 1st. But then again, that goes back into that idea that restricting can lead to that overeating or that binge eating later on, which we of course want to try to avoid. So we'll move on to the next slide on New Year's resolution downfalls. So we are entering that time of year when we are starting to really think about, what is my New Year's resolution going to be? What changes am I going to make to my diet or to my lifestyle with the new year coming up? So it's really important to really think about some of the potential New Year's resolution downfalls that you might run into because we want to try to make sure that, we're setting ourselves up for success when we are making these New Year's resolutions for diet and lifestyle changes. So number one, the fad dieting. Like Mara said, we do want to try to avoid fad dieting because we know that that yo-yo dieting or going on a crash diet, losing weight, and then coming off of that restrictive diet, going back to old eating habits, regaining the weight, and then starting the cycle over again can lead to a lot of negative health consequences. So we want to try to avoid those fad diets as much as possible. Restricting food intake. So telling yourself, I can only eat, 300 calories a meal, or I need to stick to 1,200 calories a day in order to lose weight. Again, it can lead to that binge eating behavior and can kind of kick into gear that primal drive to overeat if we are restricting our bodies of the calories and the nutrients that it really needs. Having rigid goals and rules for yourself. So telling yourself, for example, I will not eat a cookie or another dessert in all of 2022. With such rigid goals, it can be easy to get discouraged and kind of fall off the bandwagon, if you will. So we need to, give ourselves some grace and tell ourselves that it is okay for us to, have a cookie and then, maybe the next day focus on, eating a little bit more vegetables or whatever it might be. Unrealistic goals and expectations. So maybe telling yourself, I want to weigh as much as I did in high school. When you set unrealistic goals for yourselves that are not attainable, it can be very frustrating and it can be very hard to stick to these goals. We want things that are going to be attainable. So we'll move on to the next slide. No permission to make mistakes. So like I said before, it is okay for you to, make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Goals aren't specific enough. Lose weight, but how are you going to do that? It's going to be much easier to be able to stick to goals if they are more specific. Setting too many goals. So for example, saying I want to lose weight, work out 7 days a week, eat only organic. With so many goals, it can be really hard to stick to all of them. So it's better to have less goals that are more attainable. And then lack of ongoing motivation. To be successful, your goals should create long-term change. Next slide. All right, so just some tips moving into the new year for those of you looking for some of these New Year's resolution tips and ideas. Number one, skip those fad diets. We know that it leads to decrease in metabolism. It's reduced success for future weight loss attempts. So we want to try to skip out on those fad diets. Make small, accomplishable goals instead of one large end goal. So for example, telling yourself instead of, I'm going to lose weight, maybe you can say, I'm going to follow the plate method and fill half of my plate with fruits and vegetables, and I'm going to eat off of a 9-inch plate. By setting this more accomplishable goal, that is going to lead to weight loss, and it gives us, something to actually work towards. Allow yourself days off from working on your goal. We would never expect ourselves to, work 24/7 without taking time off or weekends off or anything like that. So we should think the same thing about some of these New Year's resolution goals. Always make sure that you, plan for special events, vacations, and things like that to be able to really, truly enjoy yourself. Next slide. If you cheat on your resolution or goals, it is not the end of the world. Weight loss is not linear, and we're looking for progress, not perfection, because that is what is truly going to create those long-term changes. Keep up motivation every day. So it can be helpful to make maybe a mantra for yourself to repeat, maybe every morning or throughout the day, maybe something like, I will eat healthier because my body deserves it. Stay positive. Maybe set an affirmation for yourself, something like, I love my body regardless if I lose weight or not. And of course, don't compare yourself. Everyone is on their own journey. Your journey is not the same as your sisters or your coworkers. And when you are trying to compare yourself to other people, it can really lead to those feelings of frustration. So just focus on yourself and your goals and how you plan to achieve those ultimately. Next slide. So for those of you interested in a little bit more information on intuitive eating, we do have some resources here available to you that we recommend. First one here is intuitiveeating.org. They have really good information on their website there, including some really great blog posts. Highly recommend checking that out. And also 2 books that I recommend, the Intuitive Eating Workbook, as well as this Intuitive Eating Revolutionary Program That Works. Both of these were written by the original intuitive eating dietitian, and they are really, really great resources. So highly recommend those as well. And I think that about wraps it up. So we can move on to questions.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I liked that presentation, and I'm even more excited to get going with the questions and answers. A reminder to our audience, if you'd like to put your question into the box, I will moderate those for you. We can get your questions answered. Let's talk a little bit more about the food police. So we talked about it a little bit in terms of, being aware of it and making sure that we don't pay too much attention. But what are some tools or ways that we can talk to family members and continue a respectful relationship with them if they are being our food police? They might have good intentions, hey, I read a study that sugar feeds cancer, so you probably shouldn't have that piece of pie. I mean, how can we respectfully respond to those kind of good intentioned comments and still maintain a respectful relationship?
Yeah, so I think it's individualized for everybody and how their family works. But I think it's, either just saying thank you and, thank you for your comment, or, I appreciate your feedback, and just kind of moving on and just, telling yourself, am I just enjoying, some cake or some pie? Is this a celebration? Reminding your family members that, hey, it's the holidays, let's enjoy. This is not a time to worry about all the things that you can worry about in life. And just let's ask your family members to take a break from that. I think everyone has enough stressors in their day and in their life, and so just asking for it not to revolve around food that day, and maybe and just kind of take a moment to, hey, let's enjoy this meal, and not talk about what's good and what's bad, and let's just enjoy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. Kathryn, any other input?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think also, we might hear comments from family members or friends, maybe talking about somebody else who they say, oh, I cannot believe so and so is having, piece of pie, or, she looks like she, has gained a little weight this year, reminding them that, there's not a place for those kinds of comments, especially, well, year round, but especially during the holiday season, can be really, really important too. And I think impactful in reminding people, that everybody deserves, respect, regardless of their situation.
Definitely. Thank you. Let's talk about stress being a factor in leading to weight gain. Several, as you know, several of our oncology patients, even more of our caregivers, are experiencing weight gain. Can stress lead to that? And how what are your tips on how to manage this kind of weight gain? Or is it one of those things you just accept while you're in the thick of it? Let's talk about that a little bit.
So stress can lead to weight gain. There are hormones that are released that can make it so that the body puts more energy into stores or into reserves. Kind of think about, I always tell my patients to think about what would happen with a caveman, right? So if your body perceives stress, it's going to perceive stress as a lion's attacking you, or maybe that there's no food available. And so your body's not thinking about stress as, your mom told you a bad comment, or maybe, whatever's going on in your life. And so the body does put on reserves. And so it is something that a lot of patients that I work with do have to struggle with. But I try to let everyone know that, you can only change what you can change, right? So there are some things that you just, if you have a big stressor in your life, like a cancer diagnosis or doctor's appointments or whatever it might be, I would say, give yourself some compassion, allow yourself to, work through it, and find ways to help your stress. I think meditation has been something that's come up with a lot of psychologists in oncology. And meditation has been shown to really help reduce stress levels and improve your mental health in general. And so using tools like that, there's a lot of apps out there nowadays, and trying to find other ways other than food to relieve your stress. Because one thing is, if you relieve your stress with food, I should say, that it's only going to make it worse, and you're probably going to feel guilty afterwards, which is not what I want. So definitely, find other outlets, and don't worry too much about what you can't control.
Kathryn, anything? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to add on at the end there. I think trying to find other outlets for stress relief is so important. Whether that be trying to find, a hobby that you really enjoy, or something like meditation, or being a part of a support group, to really help have some sort of an outlet for that stress outside of, turning to food as your stress relief.
awesome. Thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about steroid weight gain. Would you apply the same things when it comes to just accepting it, or are there proven methods that can show to reduce the weight gain that you can have on Dex, or things like that?
Yeah, so that's a hard one, because that's really changing your appetite, right? And so that's what we're talking about is making sure you're fed and making sure that you are listening to your body. So what I would say with that is thinking a little bit more deeply into what makes you feel fed, right? What what helps your appetite. So maybe turning to more protein foods, maybe turning to more foods high in fiber, fruits and vegetables, the foods that fill you up, rather than maybe turning towards the foods that, they taste good and they're good for us, but maybe they're not filling us up and keeping us full. So I think it's just changing the types of foods with steroid induced weight gain. However, sometimes you can't control when your appetite comes on, and it's a little bit more pronounced then than it ever has been. So give yourself some leeway there. I think a little bit it's inevitable to gain some weight, but I think you can definitely modify it, right? So the types of foods you're eating, are you staying active? Do you have things to distract you, other activities to do, like I was saying? But still definitely listen to your body. If you're hungry, don't restrict yourself. Don't make yourself feel bad for what you're feeling. Allow yourself to eat if that's what your body is telling you to do.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Kathryn, any extra thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's always my biggest recommendation with that steroid induced like hunger, that and even that the issue with not sleeping very well on the steroids, thus being up a lot of the night, and then having more cravings for some of those late night snacks and things like that. Try to keep yourself prepared for that. Keep those nutrient dense, but maybe lower energy dense foods readily available. So like Mara said, combining the protein with a complex carbohydrate that contains fiber, that's going to really help keep you full longer, rather than maybe going for a bag of chips or something like that, where you might eat the whole thing in a couple minutes and be hungry again 20 minutes later, because there's nothing that's keeping you full. So just being prepared with those types of snacks can really be helpful. And also just making sure too that you are keeping yourself hydrated. Sometimes we might think that we're hungry, but in reality, maybe we really just need to make sure that we're getting enough fluids and making sure drinking plenty of those, just to make sure that is also being taken care of, can really help too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Whenever we talk about drinking water, I want to grab my water bottle and start chugging. That's funny. Okay, one of my last questions is, do you ever recommend calorie or macro counting? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
Sure. So I like to individualize my weight loss to every patient that I have. Some people are numbers people, and some people just abide by those numbers and they can do it. And I think feeling yourself out and knowing what works and what doesn't is really vital into knowing what to do for yourself, right? So it's not a bad idea to count macros. What I typically tell my patients that, hey, I don't want you to, count every single day, every single meal, because I think that can lead to a little bit of some restrictive behaviors. But if you just, track yourself for 1 or 2 weeks, 1 or 2 days, and just see where you're at and see what the kind of average of your meals looks like, I think that's a good way to become more informed of what you're eating. So it's not a bad idea. Now you can mix all these ideas together, right? So there's no wrong way of looking at weight loss, or no wrong way of looking at, eating or nutrition. It's kind of meshing all these ideas together. So yes, there are the ideal macros, there's the ideal calories, but meshing that in with, okay, but how are you feeling? Do you need more food? What are you craving? So kind of meshing those together and allowing yourself, like we said before, some grace in, what you actually are eating and what your body's telling you, while also abiding or looking at your macros or your calories.
Awesome. Thank you. Barry was wondering how much fluid is enough fluid when we're talking about water intake.
So it does depend a little bit on the person, right? So, someone who weighs, 105 pounds and is, 5 feet tall needs less than someone who is, 160 pounds and, 5'10" or whatever it is. General rule of thumb is 64 to 80 ounces per day of fluid. Again, that's just kind of a general recommendation, and it kind of does depend a little bit on the person.
Awesome. Thank you. Ben brings up the subject of Agent Orange being one of the possible contributors to multiple myeloma, and wondering if any food chemicals or pesticides might also play a factor in cancer contributions.
Kathryn, I'll let you take this one since you work with these patients.
So specifically with multiple myeloma, not so much. Now, we do know that there are some foods that are known carcinogens for other types of cancers, especially things like breast cancer, colorectal cancer, prostate cancer. So for example, red meats and processed meats we know are carcinogens and contribute to risk of colorectal cancer. And we do also know that high intake of whole fat dairy products can also contribute to risk for prostate cancer. Those are well researched, and they are well known to be carcinogens in the diet, as well as, of course, alcohol. We do know alcohol does contribute to cancer risks of many different types of cancers as well. So those are some big ones that we have sufficient evidence and sufficient research to say, yes, absolutely, there is a link between cancer risk and these types of foods.
So then, sorry, as a follow-up question really quickly, do you encourage your patients to completely eliminate those red meats, processed meats, whole fats, or do you say limit?
So for the most part, limit, with the exception of processed meats. I really try to have my patients try to steer away from processed meats as much as possible. The American Institute for Cancer Research recommends 12 to 18 ounces of red meat per week, or 2 to 3 servings of red meat per week as an acceptable amount. And then as far as like alcohol goes, 1 serving a day for men, 1 serving a day for women, 2 per day for men is the recommended limit as far as alcohol goes.
Wonderful. We have 2 more questions if you guys have time. So one of the last questions here is, what foods are known to fight multiple myeloma? And in terms of this, I believe research is limited but upcoming in terms of nutrition related with multiple myeloma at all. Is that true?
Yes, unfortunately, multiple myeloma in diet, there isn't nearly as much research out there as there is for other types of cancer, like breast cancer, colorectal cancer. But we do know that a diet high in antioxidants is always going to be beneficial. So those fruits and those vegetables, and having variety in the colors of those that you're consuming, as well as making sure you're having adequate vitamin D in your diet is very, very important. Vitamin D, it's fairly limited in the diet, but we do get some from like fortified foods, such as like fortified orange juice, as well as a little bit in fish and also in mushrooms. And then, of course, from sunlight as well. So that vitamin D is really important as well. And then consumption of omega-3 fatty acids is also really important. So from fatty fish like salmon, as well as things like walnuts, very high in those omega-3 fatty acids as well. So that's also vital.
Awesome. Thank you. Our last question here says, frequent gas or flatulence is a problem. Are digestive enzymes helpful, or are there other solutions?
So with that, it depends on the problem. It depends on why that's becoming an issue. And there can be many reasons for that. I think that would be an individualized question. However, if it's an issue, I would say increase fiber slowly. So if you are doing a lot of fiber, let's say, some foods affect people differently. So sometimes people can't tolerate beans very well, or they can't tolerate, raw vegetables. So it's kind of figuring out your own individual body. That's kind of why I was discussing at first of how does it make your body feel, right? So it's not just what it tastes like or, what you're craving, but how does it make you feel? So kind of finding the foods that are causing those issues. So if you notice that the raw vegetables are causing the issues, that's something maybe we would like to cook, or beans, cooking that can help reduce the fiber, not reducing the fiber, but make it more digestible for the body. So it's just modifying some of these foods to help with your GI issues. Enzymes don't tend to be recommended unless there's an issue that we know is going on. Like, especially, I know I work with all types of cancer, but pancreatic cancer is one that we know that typically does need enzymes because there's a deficiency in those patients. However, that would be a question for your doctor to kind of figure out what is really going on internally and why that's becoming an issue. Now, like I said, with diet related, it's just finding those foods that are causing those issues and finding ways to modify them or to eliminate them or reduce them. And so a lot of times it's fiber, it's raw vegetables, and then making sure you're adequately hydrated, like Kathryn was saying. If you don't drink enough water with fiber, it'll become an issue pretty fast. Fiber needs more water to digest. So making sure you are drinking enough water, making sure you are listening to your body again and kind of figuring out what your body's telling you.
Great. Kathryn, just a quick follow-up question with that. Have you seen that different medications for multiple myeloma have caused any intolerances that were unknown previously? Like, for example, lactose intolerance or gluten intolerance?
So not so much gluten intolerance, but I do sometimes see like new onset lactose intolerance. And I think that is more so due to the fact that, like, if you are taking a medication that causes diarrhea, it can kind of like wash away that lactase enzyme that our bodies naturally produce, and it can make it more difficult to actually digest lactose. So in that case, either doing like the lactate milk or switching to one of the dairy alternatives like almond milk or oat milk or, one of those can really be helpful. But just to add on to what Mara was saying, I do totally agree, like with the fiber can sometimes be gas forming. So like beans, some of those like cruciferous vegetables like raw broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and things like that. Sometimes people do have some success with taking Pineau, BEAN''O. It's just an over-the-counter enzyme that can sometimes help with that complex carbohydrate breakdown. So if it is an issue of that, of those complex carbohydrates specifically, sometimes that can help a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, I think trying to get down to the root cause of maybe what is causing that flatulence or that gassiness in the first place, if it is diet related, can really, help.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Kathryn. This has been an excellent presentation. I've learned a lot. I think our audience has too, and excited to get this recording out to other people. So thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to end with a couple of outro announcements for our group, but thank you so much for being here today. So the Nutrition and Wellness for Myeloma chapter will meet again, and that will be in February. We'll be talking about interpreting nutritional data with Francesca Castro, who is a clinical, she's a research dietitian at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So that's going to be helpful because I feel like sometimes we get, I'll say, bombarded with information. And so being able to interpret, okay, what actually matters to me as a multiple myeloma patient or caregiver of a multiple myeloma patient, and how can I apply that in my life? So that's going to be in February. This chapter will be meeting every other month throughout the year of 2023. You may be interested in other upcoming events. This Thursday, we have our Northeast. So if you're from Maine all the way to Pennsylvania, We're going to be having an event of sharing ugly sweaters or your favorite holiday sweater. We're going to be sharing our favorite recipes and just our stories of how this 2022 year has impacted us. And then if you live in Florida, our Florida group is meeting on Wednesday the 13th. I don't think it's Wednesday. I think it's Tuesday. We'll have to look at that. But it's the Can Myeloma Journey Be a Gift? So we're going to be talking about how the myeloma journey has been a gift and in what ways, if it has at all. And then what gifts are we willing to give back to the myeloma community through our service, through our education, through our compassion. So if you are in any of those regional areas, we'd love to have you, or if you're outside those regions and want to join us, you're more than welcome to. The link to sign up for any of those events and even more events I haven't mentioned is at the bottom of the slide and will be included in the follow-up email. And thank you, Barry. He clarified that December 13th is a Tuesday. That was my error. I apologize. So we'll see you on the Tuesday, December 13th if you're in Florida. A special thanks to our community event sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, GSK Genentech, AbbVie, and Amgen. And thank you to each of you for helping us build this nutrition and wellness for myeloma community. I appreciate you and hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy holidays, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.